Hi, my name is Naila Kabeer, and I'm a professor here in Gender and International Development. I work now I've spent my time 50% at the Gender Institute here and 50% at the Department of International Development. I've been here at the LSC since 2013, so not all that long. But as I like to remind people, I did my undergraduate studies here, so it feels like I've been here a lot longer. In terms of my main research focus, uh, I've done, I've become a bit more disciplined in recent years because I've done research on a vast number of different topics, but I guess they're all, in a sense, interrelated around the idea of the economy and around gender, poverty, and the economy. So I've looked from that perspective, I've looked at child labor, I've looked at microfinance organizations, I've looked at collective action by the poor, and I've looked at specific uh, groups of women workers. I'm particularly interested in gender and labor markets and livelihoods. And that's, in a sense, where I'm trying to become a bit more disciplined. So rather than trying to cover all the different aspects of poverty and exclusion and so on, I'm trying to now focus in on labor markets. Um, I actually went to a boarding school in India, and it was a Catholic Irish Catholic boarding school. And so I learned to speak English from a very young age. And actually, so as a result, I've done most of my research in English. But I do speak Bengali, and it's not terribly good, but it's good enough to gossip in. So it's good enough for the kind of interviews that I do. I always think, your fluency in a language can be judged by can you gossip in that language. And so I can gossip in Bengali, and so I try as a result to do quite a lot of the research I do in Bangladesh because that's where I am originally from. And because the research I do involves talking to people. So I do numbers, and I have done quite a lot of surveys. But my real joy is in trying to make sense of the numbers by talking to the people who generate those numbers. In terms of what I'm working on right now, quite a lot of it is focused on the labor markets issue. So I'm looking at how gender plays out in labor markets in different parts of the world. As you know, for economists, labor markets were long seen as very neutral territory. People just bought and sold on the basis of price. But what we do know, particularly from South Asia, where we have had stratification of labor market by various kinds of identity, including caste, gender, religion, and so on. And that is true across South Asia. So I'm interested in trying to bring a sociological perspective into our understanding of labor markets. So keeping economic issues in the forefront, but asking how does sociology help to interpret economic issues somewhat differently to take account of the things that economists often leave out. So right now I'm kind of focusing on looking at these sorts of questions, and particularly gender. And I'm doing work, I have just finished looking at how labor markets might empower women. Access to economic opportunities might empower women. And so I did comparative work in Bangladesh, Egypt, and Ghana. Very, very fascinating because, of course, Ghana, women have always worked in entrepreneurship, but Egypt and Bangladesh are part of a society where very low labor force participation, and that's true of much of South Asia. So more recently, I've started to look at the issue of um, men and women, and how does culture affect the kinds of labor market choices that men and women make. And I started doing that work in Bangladesh. I'm recently doing some work in West Bengal as well. And the reason this thing about men has come in is that we often think of cultural norms as somehow applying much more to women. But across the world, men are concerned with issues of status, you know, men's religion, men's caste, all of these sociological factors do affect what men are able to do or would like to do. So that's part of what I'm doing right now. I'm also doing work on the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh, where over 1,000 women died from the garment industry, and the garment sector has always been something I've done a lot of work on. So we're looking now at are there any improvements in governance in the global garment value chain? So it's a collaborative project, but Bangladesh is at the heart of it. And we're talking to the lead firms in Germany, UK, Sweden, Australia, and we're talking to employers in Bangladesh, and we will talk to workers in Bangladesh to see whether this terrible tragedy has resulted in any real concrete change in how the industry treats its workers. And of course, these are mainly women workers. There's one more thing that I'm doing, and that is looking at adolescents, gendered adolescents. And that is a much more, my role is much more analytical and theoretical. But it's asking, how can we intervene early enough in the life of a girl to ensure that the rest of her life is not as it was, if you like, predicted to be, that we open up opportunities that were perhaps not a part of the ascribed life course that she might have had, given her economic status and her social group. In terms of impact, I think a lot of the impact that I've had has been relating to my concerns with empowerment and with economic empowerment. And I think, I actually wrote a concept paper about economic empowerment, and it seems to have been one of the most cited. And it's not just cited by academics, although a lot of academics cited it because it sort of tried to give a very concrete analysis of what we mean by this, intangible concept called empowerment. But it's been used by practitioners, NGOs. I've come across NGOs in South Asia that said how useful they found that way of thinking about empowerment and how it has influenced the way that they analyze their own efforts. So I think the area of economic empowerment perhaps is an area that I've done quite a lot of work on. And I've also looked at intersecting inequalities, how gender, caste, class, religion, minority religions, how these things come together to create particularly durable forms of inequality. And again, South Asia is a place that one can study these issues very well. And in terms of the benefits of having a South Asia Center, I think, we have a very difficult region. And I think the more we try and understand each other, talk to each other, given that we have so much in common, so much history in common, so much culture in common, I would like to see much greater cooperation across South Asia. Now, I'm not in a position to make that happen, being a mere academic, but at least perhaps in the South Asia Center here, there is a great deal of complementarity in our research. There is a great deal of possibility for synergy, for overlaps, for collaborations, connections, and also a way of creating a kind of a home within LSE, because after all, there is an identity that we all share in common, and we feel very comfortable with people from the region. We feel comfortable with people from other regions as well, but we feel comfortable in a different way with people from the South Asian region.